Well, hi, everybody. This is Catherine Boyle. I am delighted to bring to you the second in our series of Facebook Live events for the Mental Health Ministry Leaders Group. And today I'm delighted to bring to you Kristin and Todd Evans. Kristin and Todd run a website called disabilityparenting.com. And I've known Kristin and Todd, I guess, for at least a couple of years now. Kristin and Todd have written some blog posts for us and spoken at some key ministry events. And so, they're just really delightful and have a lot of great wisdom and insight for this audience. So welcome, Kristin and Todd.
Hi, thank you.
Thank
Glad
you
to be
so
here.
much, Catherine. We're excited to be here.
Well, I just wanted to let everybody know that we are recording this. We will take your questions as we are able. So if you have joined the webinar link or if you have joined the Facebook Live in the Mental Health Ministry Leaders Group, just feel free to go ahead and post those questions, but just know that I am solo here. So it might take me a few minutes to get those worked in, but just appreciate you being able to be here today, Kristin and Todd. And again, as we're able, we will definitely work your questions in. So I gave just a little tiny overview about who you guys are. So tell me and tell the audience a little bit about yourselves and your family.
Well, sure. I know you told us that a number of the audience are involved in ministry and things, and that's kind of the start of our background as we were in college. Just wanted to go into ministry and to help people, and we're so excited about it and got married to do that. Decided to go to grad school together at Wheaton College to work on a master's in spiritual formation and ministry and camping ministry, and did that together and just had all those joys of working in churches and serving in different places. And it seemed like things were going pretty well in our ministry. We were hoping to help people change the church world, all those kind of big dreams you might have,
Right.
that you might be familiar with yourself.
Yep.
But well along into that, serving in the church for many years, with youth and families, helping with that. And then
And then our family dynamics kind of put a wrench in that plan and in our mission. After about a decade of serving in church ministry with our daughter with severe disabilities, it just wasn't working anymore with the ministry and the nights out and the stress. And of course, you can imagine financially with a Cadillac, child. So we made the very hard decision to leave ministry,
Yeah.
and switched gears, switched careers. I went back to school to get my master's in social work and become a licensed master's social worker. And so at this point, we have our ministry. Todd's running his own business. I'm writing and speaking, and of course, we're full-time caregivers.
Right. Right. Well, so your website, again, it's called disabilityparenting.com, and your focus is empowering parents and couples caring for children with all types of disabilities and strengthening their faith, mental health, and marriages. So that combination is really important, but I want to know, and I think the audience probably wants to know why that combination, faith, mental health, and marriage, is really important to you as a couple and as a family.
Well, we identified, those three as just things that we're passionate about, because really it's the balance of those things that we found in our life that leads to healthy outcomes, healthy living, ability to care for our children and to care for each other and to live daily. So it's this balance, and each one of them directly impacts the other. And so we kind of said these three are very, very important to focus on and what we really want to do.
Yeah, and it's hard to achieve that balance, especially when you're a parent caregiver. A lot of times the hyper focus is on, for us, it was literally just trying to keep our daughter alive.
Right.
And not lose our house, and it just
Right.
was crisis mode. And so a lot of times when you're in one crisis, you're in another crisis.
Right.
And so, spiritual struggles, spiritual crisis for me, which led to a mental health crisis, which led to a marriage crisis.
Right.
So, as Todd said, they directly impact one another. For parents who are single, and doing this on their own, their faith and mental health do directly, spiritual crisis can worsen mental health and vice versa.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's why we're passionate professionally, research wise, but also from our personal experience.
Right. So if you're watching this and you're either, in the webinar link, or you've joined us live in the Facebook group, if you have any questions or have any comments about that, I suspect that quite a few people in our audience have had similar kinds of experiences or work with people who do have those kind of experiences. So Kristin and Todd have lots of wisdom to share on that. So yeah, and you just talked about how kind of one crisis can beget another. And really the greater that challenge is that the individual or the couple, the family has, then, the greater the stress is on the marriage. So if there's a family or a parent or, somebody who's got a loved one they care about, who's in this kind of challenge right now, who's listening, what's one or two things that you might suggest that can help them strengthen and support their mental health today?
Yeah, so there's little ways and then there's formal ways. So, there's big ways to strengthen your mental health. Obviously, formal, seeking help, seeking counseling, seeking
Right.
pastoral counseling. But it's often for parent caregivers, we don't have those big chunks of time or the
Right.
money, or,
Right.
So it's the little things throughout the day that add up. Literally deep breathing, doing that a couple times throughout the day lowers our body's stress response. And we're in this chronic daily stress that's unbelievable. And then that stress response can lead to long-term mental health and physical. So it's the little things throughout the day, the deep breathing to lower our heart rate, the breath prayers, just literally praying a prayer and inhaling God's peace and exhaling our anxiety. Going for a walk
Yes.
does wonders, being out in nature spiritually and mental health and marriage. So it's the little things, it's also the big things. To support a family in this, the biggest thing they need is a respite break.
Yes.
Somehow. That is one of the biggest ways you can support. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because that just provides time for them to care for themselves, even though they may not think of it as a mental health break time or something
Right.
like that. That's what's often happening.
Right.
They need it and don't know it,
Mhm.
and just finding those, like Kristin said, those little ways throughout the day or larger chunks of time are just critical for sustaining a healthy mental outlook on life and being able to be the parents and the spouse and other roles that you have each day.
Right. Yeah, it's really hard to see any other future or outcome or, if, next 5 minutes, if you can't, you know, get that one little thing, or take that one little break. We did a segment a few years ago with Jess Ronnie, and it was called
Mhm.
Removing a Straw from the Camel's Back. It's like, the adage of that one thing, just like, takes you over the edge. But
Mhm.
what if that one little thing could be removed? Well, it can give you that mental breather that you need to be able to say, okay, I can see possibilities. I can see something better and different than I've been able to
Mhm.
see, just because my stress has just, completely blinded me. Um, one thing that Beth Golick at the church where she serves, they have done regular respite for parents for decades now. And that is such a gift that ministry leaders can undertake. And you may not think of it as a mental health ministry, but it so is mental health ministry. I mean, you guys are sitting there nodding like, yes, it
Yes.
absolutely is.
That's
It
probably the
absolutely is.
single, yeah, that's probably the single biggest thing that led to kind of us rebuilding our marriage. We were
Mm,
on the point of divorce at one point through all this and just struggling how to get through. And it was someone from the church that volunteered to come over so that we could get out.
yep.
We didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know where we were going to go. And but they gave us that chance. And through that opportunity, God worked in our marriage over time, and that was the spark that kind of started getting things going again for us.
And Beth couldn't go to a church respite program. She was medically fragile and
Mhm.
homebound. So it took someone being willing to come over to the house and learn how to
Mhm.
care for her. So that's
Right,
thinking
right,
outside the box a little bit.
right. Yeah, and yeah, it's relational respite. It doesn't have to be a big fancy program that requires,
Mhm.
hundreds of volunteers. It can just be somebody who's willing maybe to show up, and vacuum your house and
Yep.
let you
Mhm.
take a nap, and
Mhm.
it doesn't
Oh,
have to
yeah.
be anything big and fancy. It really doesn't. So just a little reminder here, if you're on the webinar link, or if you're in the Facebook group, and watching live, go ahead and submit a question if you have one. We'll also have some information about being able to contact Kristin and Todd before we get to the end. So, but we'd love to be able to work in any questions or comments that you might have. So, well, what kind of support do you encourage people to seek from their pastor or their church leaders? I mean, like clearly you just mentioned that somebody was willing to come over and just give you a little
Mhm.
break. I mean, that's an easy thing. So, but like if somebody was asking you today, what would you tell them to say to their church leaders?
Yeah, I'm thinking perspective of when I served in the church, and I remember people often wouldn't come forward to say they didn't think their problem was big enough for me, or that
Yes.
I had so many other things going on. I was caring for so many other people in the church that I didn't have time for their problem. But what made the difference is the people that were willing to kind of break through that barrier. And that's what I would challenge people with: is don't worry about how it's impacting me. Um, Reach out to me, tell me you're struggling, tell me something specific that's
Mhm.
going on, or something specific that I can do to help you.
Mhm.
Say we're having a lot of time that we're having to go to the doctor this month. We got a lot of tests coming up, and it's just stressing us out to make dinner at night. Is
Mhm.
there any way that you could help with some dinners this week or this month? So
Right.
be very specific is what I would tell people to do, because that's when I know, as a church leader, I would know how to jump in and help. I
Mhm.
couldn't always think of these things or know what would help, but if you can be specific, that's going to make a huge difference in how I can
Right.
help you.
Right.
And caregivers don't like to ask for help. We it's like we can't even, we're so overwhelmed we can't think of how somebody can help us. But
Right.
just, going to the pastor and saying, "Can we just talk? I'm struggling spiritually.
Mhm.
Um, can we talk? Can you help me figure out, I might be depressed. Can you help me figure that out?" Just to have the courage to go and just ask for what you need.
Yes, yes. And a few minutes ago, you mentioned something about, the cost of getting counseling and that sort of thing. I mean, if you have the time and the ability, to go somewhere in person or to carve out that time to do an online appointment, that the finances can be a barrier. Well,
Mhm.
I mean, what excellent way to use church benevolence funds, but to be able to
Mhm.
provide some funding for people who really could benefit
Mhm.
from that kind of counsel.
Yes.
So, and there's lots of things that churches can do that maybe
Mhm.
they wouldn't necessarily put under the umbrella of mental health
Right.
ministry, but they
Mhm.
really are when it kind of comes right down to it.
Mhm.
And I would
So,
say you asked about that question, and Kristen said very clearly, which I feel like is we have a hard time as a family with children with disabilities or mental crises and things reaching out. The
mhm,
biggest thing that a leader can do is just ask a simple question. Hey, it sounds like your life might be hard right now. And
mhm,
that can open up a floodgate. That a simple
Yeah.
question similar to that. And that's what I
right.
would challenge leaders to do is ask that very simple question that it must be tough.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that just gives a forum for them to share.
For the tears to
That
fall.
can, yeah.
That's right. That's what I'm thinking too. It's like, oh yeah, that's gonna open up the
Yeah.
tears. Well, so same question really, but for the mental health professional, so, what support do you encourage people to seek from mental health professionals? Because it's not going to be the same exact thing that people go to a church leader for versus a mental health professional.
Mhm. Yeah, so everything from maybe you don't think counseling can help you, but
Hmm.
hey, one of our blog posts was, maybe it could be right for you. Consider these benefits to they're in crisis, or they're experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, or their grief, they're having a hard time grieving, or maybe their marriage, even if couples don't think their marriage is struggling, if they're special needs parents, they could probably really benefit from counseling and they just don't
Right.
realize it. So in every aspect across the spectrum, we encourage parents to go for counseling before it becomes a crisis.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's when it usually happens is people reach out when it's a crisis
Right.
and triage is needed and
Yes.
that kind of thing. But even just being able to encourage from the mental health perspective, just to talk through life and just to have someone to um, just talk with outside of your spouse or outside of your
Mhm.
family. An
Mhm.
outside perspective can be so valuable. So that's one thing I would tell them to seek is just someone to talk about life with besides somebody close to you.
Or learn how to manage stress and cope.
Yes.
That's a big one.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I was thinking recently about, and this is not something that that I came up with, but how, like, when we can verbalize things that are challenges, it moves it from the area of our brain where we process the emotion and the feelings and the intensity of the situation, and moves it into the logical side of the brain where
Mhm.
when you can speak it out, it kind of it's like not keeping a secret anymore. When you can speak about a secret, it diminishes the power, and
Mhm.
this diminishes the power. Counseling helps diminish the power over the things that you're struggling with, because
Mhm.
you're talking about it, and hopefully seeing that there are options, there are solutions, and maybe that you didn't even realize until you start
Mhm.
speaking it out, that you'll see that there are things that God has provided in your own life
Mhm.
to help. So, well, another quick little plug here. If you got a question, go ahead and submit it in the live stream on the Facebook page or in the webinar chat if you signed up for that link, because we've only got a few more minutes with Todd and Kristin. Um, well, kind of piggybacking on that last couple of questions about pastors, support from mental health leaders. Have you seen churches or mental health professionals work well together to support families who are in a crisis? And if you have, I'm just curious and would love to hear what worked well, and what could be helpful for other ministry leaders and mental health professionals.
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge in our churches and in our communities. There's this isolation between the two fields so often, and them coming together. So we really racked our brains for a long time trying to think through the family crises we saw in our church and things. And it wasn't often that we saw mental health professional and ministry leaders kind of come together
Mhm.
for that. One
Or,
thing.
or sorry,
Okay.
from my perspective too, as a therapist,
Mm.
trying to wrap my brain, when did I coordinate with a pastor?
Mhm.
When was that? So,
Yeah. So honestly, we couldn't think of much about the best we came up with was a pastor kind of reached out to a mental health professional to be able to get a referral
Mhm.
and said, who's a counselor in the area? I've got this person struggling with this,
Mhm.
confidentially, without saying names or identifying
Sure.
information,
Sure.
and said, who would you recommend? You have a couple recommendations of someone they could go see.
Mhm.
Um, and and that's really the main one we came up with.
Mhm.
there was, this wasn't, emergent crisis, but a respite program at our church. We still think of this, and this was years ago. One time during the respite program, a mental health therapist came, a
the
marriage
church
counselor
the church sponsored it and
Mhm.
had him come
Mhm.
and lead a little workshop.
for
Um,
married couples.
mhm.
And that was phenomenal for the
Mhm.
two to connect. And so that was
Mhm.
one way, we really saw. But in ministry, Todd really, we were thinking about to mental health emergency situations. It ended up being whoever was the minister for that age group.
Mhm.
So Todd would have a youth in crisis. He would work with the family. And then we were like, well, anybody else in the church involved? And we were just, and
Mhm.
I had a college student who attempted suicide, and I was the one who was coordinating and following up, but just
Mhm.
trying to think about what other follow-up was there with the church or support for the ministry leader
Mhm.
that,
Right.
was,
Right.
and we just were trying to think of a way, and maybe the other way is, I think a couple times there was a mental health professional in the church who the pastor would call and do an emergency confidential, consultation.
Mhm.
Do they need to go to the
Mhm.
RR, ER? Is there a therapist? So not a whole lot.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one
Yeah,
of the
I
things
mean,
with me.
go
Oh, go
ahead,
ahead.
Todd.
I think it's just one of the things that's a challenge, and we were come up with a few ways to try to help with some of those relationships and try to foster more coordinated efforts together, and we can share those in a couple minutes, I think,
Mhm.
and all. But that's a tough thing, I think, still for even
Right.
though the stigma of going to mental health counseling or anything else is um, been largely dropped. It's still out there some, but
Right.
it's led to a divide that just takes time to kind of find ways to connect between this professional world of mental health and the more of a traditional. I don't want to say non-professional because spiritual guidance and pastors are very professional, but
Mhm.
but it's seen in a different light. And how do you bring those two worlds together? A
Right.
regulated versus a somewhat non-regulated
Right.
community.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and we talk about that, and I mean, we are starting to see, just from the key ministry perspective, some collaboration, and not in terms of like sharing private information about
Right, right,
clients,
Mm.
but about
right.
just establishing relationships between ministry leaders and local mental health professionals, so that you can make the referrals, and so that there's a trust there, that knowing that
Mhm.
people on either end are going to be treated well and cared for well. So, anyway, I'm just always real curious, but, especially since you guys have really bridged both of those worlds, in several different roles. So, um, well, we have gotten a couple questions in the chat. And so someone asked about legal and insurance issues and liability concerns about respite in the home. I mean, if it's an individual who's from the church
Mhm.
just coming to help, I don't think that there are any, but, wanted to throw that out to you guys to hear what you have to say.
If it's a doctor or nurse and they're coming in the home, I guess that can be tricky with their license if it's an unofficial, not sanctioned by the church, but, we had a former nurse come in and sit with her so I could take a shower. And then this doctor offered to come in and sit with her in an unofficial
Hmm.
capacity. That's just
Hmm.
one of those things, you know.
Yeah, it's a friend, because
Yeah,
they're a person too,
exactly.
you know. Um, yeah, well, hopefully that answered the question. Thank you for submitting that question. And someone also said they had a death of a special needs adult student. Any guidelines or resources specifically for parents of special needs end of life care? At their church, they're building a protocol for that.
That one is really tough. The grief is
Yes.
so complex because you got the chronic long-term grief and then you've got the classic death of a loved one. I would say all the grief support and resources you can find for
Hmm.
sure. And then at the end of the life, with palliative care and home health, just all the emotional and practical support you can give, meals,
Hmm.
coming to sit so you can get a break, just practical, spiritual, and emotional support.
Hmm. Yeah, I know, hospice care typically has great grief support, grief groups. So, for the person who submitted that question, you might want to reach out to local hospice organizations to see what's
Mhm.
available in your area as you're, building a protocol and for use in your church. And then someone else did ask another question. Do you have any workshops or documents for pastoral leaders for them to see and read? Well, we have a big one coming up, if I can be so bold. Disability in the Church is going to be our, Key Ministries big annual conference. is literally in 2 weeks and 2 days. Not that I'm counting, but yeah, it's in Orlando this year at Calvary Orlando, and Kristin and Todd are going to be speaking there. So, so that's one great opportunity. If if you have the ability to come to Orlando, we'd love to see you there. But Kristin and Todd, what else would you like to recommend?
Well, we're definitely going to be presenting some ideas that we have for the church. Having both perspective or three perspectives, really being a family, raising a child with disabilities, mental health, and then serving in church leadership for so long. We've got some things we've seen work well, some things not as well, and just I try to think outside the box a lot and come up with some ideas. So we've got some ideas we're going to present there, and just some intentional things that are a part of it. Like we said, a budget. You got your yearly budget meetings at a church, and you're sitting down, wrestling through everything and putting things on the table, trying to make it all balance. Making that a priority.
Right.
Interconnections with local mental health care providers. We just throw a luncheon, just to invite those local mental health providers together and local pastors, just an informal, nothing, super
Right.
big to discuss or anything, but just have those come together. There's some things we'll be doing like that.
A lot of it's local resources.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is creating a local resource guide, making those connections so that you can make that connection. Will you do a sliding fee scale if, we have a congregant who needs counseling? And so a lot of it's a work ahead of time and a lot of research on the church, because, we have a lot of mental health resources and links on our site, but a lot of it's the local connections and relationships.
But those, just some of the ideas that are on websites like yours, disabilityparenting.com, and on the Key Ministry website, those, even if they're not identical resources in your area, if you're watching this, wherever you are, this can give you ideas of where to start to find those resources in your area. So, well, I want to be super respectful of your time because we're right at the top of the top of the hour now. This half hour has just really flown by, but thank you so much for your time today. Kristin and Todd have a book coming out next month. I'm not going to steal any thunder from that, and because we're going to be talking with you guys next month about that too. But if you would just tell the audience the title and again your website and where they can connect with you.
Yeah, so it's a really creative title. How to Build a Thriving Marriage as You Care for Children with Disabilities. Okay. And it's very practical. Parents don't have time to, read a bunch. So it's very practical, research-based, but you wouldn't know it. So it's available for pre-order.
Weave in personal stories and scripture and encouragement throughout it too. And just every chapter ends with a practical guide. So the purpose of it is like a survival guide, where you can just pick it up and say, I need help on this one thing. We can't communicate right now. I'm having trouble. And you just open that book to that chapter and try to get some quick info. So
yes, that's wonderful. All right, well, and quick disabilityparenting.com, go there to find all the resources that you guys offer and to connect with Kristin and Todd. And again, we'd love to see you at Disability in the Church. Just go to the Key Ministry website, click on DATC 2024. You'll find all the info, and Kristin and Todd will be there. So thank you both so much for your time today, and I can't wait to see you in a couple weeks. So
thank you so much, Catherine.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys again. So for the Key Ministry team, I'm Catherine Boyle. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll talk with you real soon. Bye.